Welcome everyone. This is going to be the Sephiroth Should You Pull video for the War Division's Final Fantasy VII collaboration. And we're going to start off with the AI test where I've recorded some footage with Sephiroth in the JP version, and he was a very easy companion unit to find. He's pretty much every single companion unit, so you can tell that he was a very popular pull there. So this is turn one. He has just started, and right away somebody's in range, so he's going to use his awesome LB. I made sure to put it into 1 speed so that you can see it in all its glory. And we can see that he will have that attacker AI. He's going to attack if somebody is in range. However, if there is nobody in range, he will use his team buffs, and in this case, he is using his mass immune stance. He's giving that light resistance to his party, and then we're going to see whatever he chooses to do next. So at this point, he's using Ziza's bells, which he has equipped as a TMR. He's using that over his 50% all damage barrier. So if you're wanting him to use that barrier, which also gives him AP consumption, that gives him an AP refresh, and then his LB gives him an AP consumption down, you're not really going to be looking at using bells necessarily. You're probably going to want to get him to use his team buff or another TMR buff, and then his barrier, because his AP is more than likely going to be fine, especially considering his mass immune actually gives him 15 starting AP as well. All right, here is another loadout for Sephiroth, and this time we're going to see, again, he is going to use his mass immune stance. He's going to get that light resist, activate his new counter ability, which is 80% counter preemptive, and then this one does not have TMR set, so we'll see what he decides to use next. He does have the soldier sub, so he could use the hazard form to gain 50% attack and deal a little bit of damage to himself. But what we are going to see from Sephiroth here in just a second is that he'll use his barrier. So this is a 50% 3-time all damage barrier, and it's just given him an AP restore. So he has AP restore here, AP consumption down from his limit burst. He is going to be, an easy person to build in terms of using his AP. And so there he had a move, did not use any skills. That means he doesn't have anything else turned on. So he could have used a third skill there, and that I guess would have been the hazard form. All right, so we are going to start with the pros and cons of Sephiroth. We're going to talk about why he is so good, and then we'll talk a little bit about how strong he is against certain types of units, etc., and kind of, go over all the usual stuff that I would cover in one of these videos. So let's start off with the utility that he brings to his kit. So first of all, the AP, we've already talked about it. He has good starting AP with his sword equipped at 15 extra. He has the AP auto restore on his barrier, and then he has 40% AP consumption down on his LB. So that's a really nice kit to basically make sure that you're going to be in good shape at the start of a battle to actually do some damage. And the nice part about that is that none of that is dependent for match 2 of a guild battle, because he will still have all of those things except for, oh wait, yeah, his LB. So that's the one thing that we will kind of get to, is that his LB is so good, but it also only has that one use. That was a bit of a spoiler for you there. Okay, so otherwise he's got physical reflex. He's got a temporary 80% preemptive counter. So he uses his he uses his team buff, and he gets this 80% chance to activate counter that is a small damage. It's got a decent range on it, and it's preemptive. So that's really quite strong. He's going to be almost always doing that. He also has a lot of different 100% hit attacks. He's got multiple AoE 100% hit attacks, his LB and another kit, one in his main kit, and then he has on his soldier sub the paralyzing edge, which is also a single target 100% AoE, 100% hit attack. So 3 different skills. That's really good. He can ignore courage and re-raise on his LB, and then he has a 3-hit chaining skill as well. So lots of different utility things that he can use to be great in both PvP and PvE. Then we can talk about his damage, which is very high. Now, you might look at his kit and see there's not too many gigantic modifiers, but his attack stat is really big, especially if we use self-sacrifice. And he also has 50% defense penetration and 20 to 60% slash pen just on his kit, let alone what you're going to give him via equipment and vision cards, etc. He also has barrier break, defense imperil, dispel, protect, which is specifically on his soldier sub. And then he has access to non-type damage and to strike damage using his sub jobs in his main kit. He can also build crit damage with his katana, and there's lots of good crit support in Dark, so that is really good to see. So overall, we're going to be seeing him do a lot of damage. Very, very powerful DPS unit. That's his main job. And then we have the survivability, and this is where he's quite interesting because he has that 50% all damage barrier. It's 3 times, and then he has 20% resistance to all elements. Doesn't matter what it is, he gets 20%. Now that's penetrable, except for like some weird, like we have that one TMR, I can't remember whose it is, that has like earth penetration, like that's not a common thing in the game. That's a really big stat to have. He also has 15% slash, missile, and pierce resistances, and a very high HP stat. He's got like kind of pseudo tank, like just below snow, kind of in terms of HP. It's a very, very high HP stat for a DPS unit. Very cool to see. And then he has a 20% light resistance buff for himself and allies, which is obviously really good if people are trying to counter him with light, that he can mitigate that damage. Now, we're not saying that he's going to, be surviving against many light attacks, but if you survive, you can be healed, and that's kind of, the big thing with bruisers is that they don't die too easily. Now we're going to talk about the cons for Sephiroth. There really aren't that many, and maybe people will say I'm nitpicking here, but these are kind of like the things that jumped out to me. So first of all, like I mentioned, I hinted at already that his LB is gone after the first guild battle. So in arena, not a problem. In PvE, not a problem. But when you go into a second fight and all of a sudden any unit with courage and re-raise, you cannot deal with them with just Sephiroth alone. That is something that is, notable. It also affects his ability to kind of conserve his AP a little bit. Maybe that just makes him fair. Yeah, that's something to mention. It's not a deal breaker. He's also on the slower side of URs, but he does have an agility passive that brings him up into a good range. And the reason I bring that up is because having that on means you're probably not having self-sacrifice on, and you're sacrificing a little bit of damage in order to get that agility. It's just something you'll have to play around with depending on what type of team you're building. He also has only a few high potency moves that have pretty low range. The best move that he has with some range, aside from his limit burst, is going to be Hazard Break on his soldier sub. But even that's a 3 square, and then you get your cross AoE. And I do think soldier sub's very interesting for him because you get the Hazard Break, which is a massive modifier, but you also get the Dispel Protect on it. You get another 100% hit attack. You get another buff if you need it. So I do think that's kind of an interesting sub for him, and it does kind of provide that big finishing move. If someone's like really quite chonky, he can tear into them. And then he has no courage or re-raise, and that's pretty much, that's probably the biggest fault. It's not the biggest deal, because he has the bulk that he can still survive, and especially if you're running a healer, that's going to help him out a lot. But not having that is sometimes kind of like, something that we have to mention, I guess. And then the other thing I'll mention is he has no defense, he has no spirit, he has no AoE resist, and he has no single target resist. But I have a big asterisk on this one because he has that elemental resist. The elemental resist might as well be 20 single target, 20 AoE resist. Right? Not one of each. Like, he gets 20 to both. That's how good that is. So that is a really big buff. So we can kind of strike that he has no AoE and single target resists on, but we can mention the defense and the spirit. And I was listening to the podcast, the Leonis Report by JB79 and Ready Player Will, and they were bringing something up that I've mentioned a lot in comments to people when I'm saying like defense is still important, and people were like, oh, like penetration just gets rid of it. It's like, no, if someone has 50% defense penetration, then you have 10 defense, you still have 5 that's acting. And also when you have 10 defense and someone uses a 25 defense break, then that's putting you to -15 instead of -25 defense. So having some defense on a character is really good for a lot of reasons, not just for penetration, but also because of imperils. So the fact that he has no defense or spirit, means that he is particularly I guess weak to any sort of defense or spirit break. So when I compare him to other physical damage dealers, I have to say that he just has every single tool available to him with decent survivability, especially if you're pairing him with a tank or a healer. And that kind of puts him at the top of when we compare him to other DPS. The only thing he's missing is that there's no courage or re-raise, but we could actually give him the Halloween Ryu TMR, which JP can't, because he can't equip it in JP, but he can in global. So that is really all he needs, maybe to make him truly a menace when he gets into situations where he might die, which will happen as more and more units come out and the meta changes. You know, that might be something that people are going to be using with him. I also wanted to mention his TMR. It's very interesting to be able to give people some attack and also 20 defense penetration. I don't think it's going to be, you know, a massively used TMR, because I think that you know, many people already have a supply of defense penetration on their kit, so it means that you're likely going to use this with older units that don't have as much defense penetration, or with units that don't have it, period, because maybe they're a tank. Like if you give it to you know, someone, oh, I guess I don't even know who you would give it to necessarily that's new, that's a tank, but like maybe you give it to King Mont or something. But I see, I wouldn't even do that because that's not really what his role is or what I'm asking him to do. But just, it's an interesting TMR. It's limited, so it's always nice to look at that kind of thing and kind of see you know, what you can play around and do with it. And then I also wanted to talk about his VC. It's, you know, it's a limited VC, and it's certainly, there's a lot of onus on people to be pulling for it, but I'm not actually going to go into full depth in it because I actually just want to see it first. I want to see what the global buff is in terms of how strong the elemental resistance is. If it's like 10 or 15 or something like that, then it's going to be a must pull and put on him for survivability. And if it's like 5, it's not as big a deal. There is very limited katana support for those job VCs right now, so this is an important one to pick up, because if you're interested in doing a katana team, then this is going to be key, because we're, you know, still waiting for 4 more, so you'll have to get this one, otherwise you're waiting even longer to be able to use it. And then when it does come together, then you will want to put this on Sephiroth. But there's a chance that you maybe don't use this with Sephiroth right away. Maybe it's a sub card or something, depending on the dark team that you're running them in, because there's lots of good dark VCs. So I guess what I'm saying is it's safe to pull, but you don't necessarily, you know, need to worry about using it right away, depending on what you're even going to be putting him into. Now let's talk about who Sephiroth's actually going to be strong against, and it's going to be pretty much everybody. And the one thing I would say is that if you look at his LB, it's just going to solve so many teams if you can hit everybody with it. So it's a high damage move that is 100% hit, and it also dispels courage and re-raise. So if you come up against a team, and maybe it's a dark team that has everybody using courage, you know, you've got Fina using re-raise, and then you've got Stern, Dark Stern is using his using the Ryu TMR. Now you've got all 3 of them. If you hit them, you take away their revivability, whatever it is, and then boom, you know, you can take out that team. Maybe it's a team with some evasion in it and you can hit them all with this LB. Maybe it's a fire team and Sorrow just got hit and also doesn't have courage anymore. That's a really big deal. It's going to help against ice teams too, but I still think ice teams are in a better spot than a lot of other teams, just because they have that a lot of imperils. So they have defense breaks, they have ice imperils and spades, and they also have missile resistance imperils. So I think that if they can stay away from Sephiroth, then they'll be able to, you know, take care of him, and they can also break barriers, etc. Now the thing there though that's kind of interesting is that Sephiroth can use a passive to get 4 move, and that he actually has these big diamond AoEs that he can really close people down. People are not going to escape him that easily. He will come for you. So depending on the map, he's going to be really good against ice as well. You know, I really can't think of a team that is going to be bad against unless we look at a team that has a lot of magic damage and barrier breaks and can just kind of tear right through him, or maybe a lot of imperils and you know, like stat breaks. That might be something that he would be weak to. He'll also be weak if you stack a lot of dark resistance, which is something that we can do. So he doesn't have a dark imperil on his kit. You would want someone to bring that if you're coming up against a really beefy tank that has put a lot of you know, dark resistance on. But then even then, with all of his AoEs, he's going to be hitting all of their allies too. It's not something that is that easily you know, fixable. We're not able to build so much resistance in this game unless it's very specific types on specific units with espers and you know, some skills like our green mage skills, or maybe like the light and dark feel with our clerics. But then again, then you're using a cleric, which there are some fine ones, but you know, for the most part, you're not using those units. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the video, and we need to talk about whether or not you should be pulling for Sephiroth, and we can throw his VC in there too. And I think that most players could and should pull for Sephiroth. I think if you've built Dark in any way, shape, or form, it's a good decision to do so and to pick up his VC while you're at it because it is limited. He is a very strong unit and will be a strong unit for a long time. He's going to help you in PvP and in PvE. He's going to help you out in a Katana team eventually once that comes together. And if you are a new player, you should totally pull him and build your account around him as your shining star, pillar, angel of death, whatever it is. He's pretty much, there for anyone that wants him. The only reason you wouldn't pull for him is if you're someone that is really not going to be building into Dark, or you just pull for the units that you like, which is always the best reason to pull somebody, is because you like the unit and you just want to play with them. That's the biggest reason to pull for a unit. But if you are just wondering if he's a safe game decision for a meta pick, then yes, he is. So as usual, the decision's going to be up to you at the end of the day, but I'm confident that you can make the right decision. And if you want to ask any questions, then you can ask me in the comments down below or on Discord. Otherwise, I'll be back with more videos because I am still in spring break and there's lots of time to be making some videos. So I'll be putting tons out, and you can just ask if you want to see anything specific in the coming days. Otherwise, I'll see you all in the next one.